Let me talk about my work with Cornerstone. So professionally, I've been working with Cornerstone the last 7 years as communications director. So this is work that they gave me a chance to do immediately after my high school. So Cornerstone was begun by a very Catholic man who thought that he would minister to the poor through this ministry called Cornerstone. So Cornerstone is into youth leadership development across 6 African countries. So I've been into this for the last couple of years, and I've learned many things through this type of work. And the beauty of it at Cornerstone, I remained a very true practicing Catholic while doing my communications work. But around that work, this vision began percolating in me that I should begin to witness to the Catholic Church. So this is 10 years ago when a guy called Owen Phillips came through Lead Like Jesus to Uganda, and I was asked to help him through his 4 days trip in Uganda, which I did pretty well. I put on major conferences targeting the Catholic Church population, which went well. So in his very final days to come back to the United States, he gave us an invitation that anybody who would want to learn the Lead Like Jesus curriculum would show up. So we tried to invite a couple of many people. Unfortunately, they didn't show up. So I showed up in Owen's hotel, and we spent the whole day just going through the material. Cut the long story short, 6 months later, Father Dave Bouvet and Dick Cunat showed up in Uganda. It was a follow-up trip, and it was all put together by the Bishop of Kampala Archdiocese. So again, the Bishop asked me to be in support of these 2 gentlemen that had come to do the ministry with the Archdiocese. You know, that was another turning point, because the 6 days that these gentlemen spent in the Archdiocese of Kampala, I was fully with them, learning, and they greatly encouraged me to carry on the vision. What they were telling me really tied into with what I was dreaming to do, to reach out to the Catholic Church. So it was like a yes, you know, that magic moment that happens to me. I saw it in that very time. So fast forward, 8 years later, we began this very wonderful ministry, Africa Catholic Mission, and it's a vehicle through which we reach out to the Catholic dioceses in Uganda. We have these 3 strategic goals, which is evangelization, education, and entrepreneurship. Let me share about evangelization in regards to our ministry. I think that the last 100 years, the Catholic Church, we've been focusing on infrastructure, making sure that every diocese has a hospital, every diocese has schools, every diocese has structures where people can go for Mass. In fact, before that, people used to go for Mass under trees. So the entire Catholic Church in Uganda was so focused on putting together all that infrastructure across the 19 dioceses. We feel at this point, the next 100 years have to be around evangelization of Catholics in Uganda, which hasn't been the major focus, because we've been so preoccupied by this infrastructure, making sure that people have access to medical need, people have access to education, people have access to vocational institutions. So right now, because we have all this infrastructure laid up in most parts of the diocese, we think that these can be evangelization fields for our many Catholic people. So with our ministry, we think that we have frontliners around evangelization. We have priests, bishops, catechists, lay faithful. So for the last 8 years, we've been putting together programs targeting those 3 or 5 major frontliners. For example, every year we do a seminarians retreat that brings together 250 seminarians from our 5 major seminaries. It is something we've been doing the last 6 years. Beyond just that, we have small groups in all the 5 major seminaries that meet weekly to talk about what does it mean to have a personal relationship with Jesus, and how does that translate in the parish. So we equip them with material, we provide content that builds that. We also have a training that brings together chaplains every year. We did that 3 years ago. We had 80 chaplains from all the 5 major dioceses within Kampala Archdiocese, And the point was, what does it mean for them to be in the school? It's interesting that most chaplains were so preoccupied by clerical roles, just be available to offer Mass for just 1 hour. Beyond that, there was absolutely less. So we challenged them that, okay, you can actually do work beyond the clerical roles. You can be a mentor. You can be a discipler. You can actually be a father figure to all these young stars. So in the nutshell, right now, we feel that the next 100 years of our church in Africa has to be around evangelization. And this whole thing flows out of what Pope Francis has been encouraging us recently, missionary disciples. So let me talk to you about our education system, which is our number 2 strategic focus as a ministry. First of all, the largest block of our population in Uganda is actually very young. Our population, 75% are below 35 years of age. So that it translates that the most percentage of young people in Uganda are actually in our education systems. And education systems, I mean high school, vocational institutions, nursery schools, and universities. So a big block of our population is actually in our education system. So from the ministry perspective, we see a big opportunity to evangelize, because these are the fields where our youngsters are. The other thing is our education system. It's interesting that the board of governors and the directors of these schools, their mindset is more of profit. They're profit-driven rather than people-driven. So most of their big discussion is always around enrollment and profit, enrollment and profit. So with our engagement with the education system is to engage the proprietors of these schools, the people who run these schools, that we have a very golden opportunity to evangelize our Catholics. So we encourage chaplains, teachers, and head teachers to engage with our programs. So we have programs that target teachers every year. In fact, recently, the Education Secretariat engaged us and we did massive training across the 19 dioceses. And the conversation around those teachers when we had those conferences was, what is it that we can do beyond just pursuing profits in these schools? What is it that we can do just beyond enrollment? What is it that we are doing for these people that God has brought in our face? So, it was a tough conversation because we were dealing with attitude change, the attitude of shifting from just profit to people first. So we've done quite a number of things. So I think every year we have these gatherings that brings together all students leaders within our Catholic schools. We have programs that brings together teachers, that we do tailored programs that target teachers. We ask them, what is it that you're doing to equip yourself with evangelization? And the interesting thing, when we're in one of the dioceses, it was Tororo Ecclesiastical Province. This teacher, Coleman, told us, in fact, for the last 20 years, she had never experienced any training beyond his high school degree that he experienced. That was an eye-opener. We realized that we have this higher demand from our teachers, but they have this level of training in the roles that we expected them to do. So what we are trying to do is to create a package that targets teachers, to equip them with evangelization skills, to equip them with 21st century skills, to help them to begin to see these students beyond just the classroom level, that these are actually men and women who are going to turn out to be the future leaders of the church. So all our trainings in church, within our church and within our schools, especially around education, is to equip the teachers that they can be frontliners in driving evangelization in our youngsters. We equip chaplains that they can actually be frontliners when it comes to evangelization. Beyond the 1 hour Mass, we equip the chaplains, equip the laity, to equip them to be people who can push this whole vision of helping many youngsters have a personal relationship with Jesus. Let me talk about our entrepreneurial efforts as a ministry. We think that this current generation, they have to be their own heroes. And heroes, I mean young men who can tackle challenges within their community, not waiting for a savior from the Western world. And, this comes from a view that, charity is not going to solve all our African problems. In fact, there's been billions and billions of dollars being pumped in Africa for charity with a big goal that let's get these people out of poverty. And that has not happened. A lot of $1 million have been put in Congo, in Sierra Leone, in Uganda, but the poverty levels are still increasing. And I think the reason is this money has been put to solve symptoms. The bigger issue hasn't been solved. Equipping men to think that they are their own heroes to tackle their own challenges. So around this area around entrepreneurship is really to increase this conversation that we can actually become our own heroes who can tackle our own problems. So let us begin the conversation. So all our ministries, all our efforts in Uganda around entrepreneurship is to begin this conversation. Look to a young man, straight in their face that you can actually do it, you can win, you can grow this business, it can actually succeed. When I was a little young man in my primary school, we used to have a fancy around having a penny pool. We thought that most heroes actually come from the West. We didn't think ourselves as heroes. So whenever missionaries would show up, we would think that, these are the people who are going to fix our issues. So we had that mindset so much. But as I have grown, traveling to the US back and forth, going to all these countries, I've learned that actually we have heroes in Africa. It's only that their consciousness around entrepreneurship hasn't been developed. So with all our youngsters in Uganda, we think that if the entrepreneurship aspect is developed, and my wish is that the Catholic Church in Uganda picks up on that in all the conversation that happened beyond just the clerical talk, the essence of entrepreneurship is talked about. It's unfortunate that the biggest business owners in Africa are actually Muslims. The biggest investors around businesses are actually Muslims and the Chinese. So this is going to bring a new type of colonialism if the Catholic Church or the West doesn't realize it. So it's frustrating to see that the largest investors around business are Chinese, and most of those Chinese, they hate anything to do with Christianity. So they would they won't care about values, they won't care about this social Catholic teaching. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So we think that if programs that include the social Catholic teaching of the Catholic Church are put within entrepreneurship, we can raise many, many entrepreneurs that have a social conscience, towards entrepreneurship, but also that put people first before profit. In doing that, we'll build a big base of young Catholic entrepreneurship who will again support the Catholic Church, and then we'll not be depending on the West. So we think that, so we've been doing small steps. Right now what we are doing is to increase the consciousness around it. We gather young men and women every year from 19 dioceses for 3 days to talk about entrepreneurship, to talk about their dreams, to talk about their aspirations. I'm always inspired by, I took history in my high school. I'm always inspired by this quote said by a statesman here in the United States during the Declaration of Independence. He said, "We believe this truth to be self-evident, that all men are created equal with unalienable rights endowed by God. Among these is life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So, it's a very inspirational. It's very, very inspirational when you think about it. I believe that many Ugandans can pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness if they are broadened, if they begin to think that they can actually be their own heroes, and those people can drive economy. In fact, I don't know any economy that grew because of charity. Economies grow because of entrepreneurship. Yeah.